The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to MLS Cup Today for November 8th, 2019. I'm Kevin Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins, as always, and joining us this morning live from Seattle, one of our favorites, Charles Boehm, freelance soccer writer for USsoccerplayers, for MLSsoccer.com, and many more places. Charles, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Pleasure to be with you.
It's always good to have you, Charles. And you're having quite the little travel adventure in Toronto for a couple of days this week, in Seattle now on the ground. Let's start with TFC because you were there and were up at training. What was your sense being around that team? Are they looking stable and settled or confident? How would you characterize TFC's mood right now?
I mean, I would start with the inevitable disclaimer that, it's always hard. Everything's very structured and sort of carefully regulated and scheduled at a week like this. So, you're always getting an incomplete snapshot to some extent. But really what I came away with was a lot of admiration for this group, this culture that's been built inside that locker room and in the organization as a whole. I mean, this is third MLS Cup final in 4 years for this group. And even at that, sort of pales in comparison to some of the other moments they've been in on that CONCACAF Champions League run last year. It's a very experienced group. They've been here before. It's obvious. Everybody knows what the rhythms and kind of schedules and build-up is like. And they seem to be not just sort of handling it all, but committed to enjoying it. Michael Bradley gave some good quotes on Wednesday about how they all want to enjoy it. They know how hard it is to reach a final. They know how rare it is, how players can work their whole careers and not get to any really, much less as many as they have over the last 5 years or so. And I think they're committed to make the most of it and turn up on the big day on Sunday.
One common denominator across all those teams that TFC's had is a man that I don't think gets as much attention or as much credit as maybe he deserves, and that's, of course, the head coach Greg Vanney. People were sharpening their knives in July here in this city. Perhaps he was on his way out. He's certainly turned that around now. Does Greg Vanney get enough credit?
No, and I'm ready to jump on board with you on this point because I just filed about 1,000 words about him to MLSsoccer.com. He's been really one of the common threads throughout all this success, and you can almost draw a direct trajectory between his arrival in mid 2014 and when things really and genuinely started to turn around for TFC. I think to some extent, he's an American working in Canada, so he doesn't have the big name recognition maybe or the flash that a European or a South American would have in a big market like Toronto. He's a little bit out of the view of American audiences, so maybe I think even among American coaches he gets overlooked and doesn't get the respect that he deserves for some of the things he's done. And then when you look at just the holistic body of work as a coach, I was able to take stock of that this week. It's really impressive. He's risen from, kind of cutting his teeth as an academy coach at Chivas USA and Real Salt Lake to now being a really well-rounded first-team manager who can manage big personalities, who can make tactical adjustments both pre-game and in the run of play, who can get the most out of players, who seems to be able to motivate. He's adapted really well in so many different circumstances. It's pretty impressive.
Charles, when we look at this whole week of preparation, of course, Monday was International Cliche Day, so it did set up the week well. We've talked about Lodero. We've talked about other great cliches. But this could very well be a game also won or lost with the goalkeepers. Stefan Fry, third time in 4 years, and this final, Quentin Westberg on the other side, I guess separated at birth with Stefan Fry. When you look at him close by, it's going to be a fascinating matchup. But when you look at the goalkeepers, just maybe not a tale of the tape, but when you look at those two sides and the goalkeepers, am I wrong by thinking that it could come down to one mistake?
Certainly, matches like this often hinge on mistakes, and there's two fascinating storylines here when you consider that you have a TFC X and Stefan Fry, who was here for some of the rough times, and has gone on to become sort of a big game specialist with with Seattle. Of course, no one will ever forget the save in the 2016 final. That in and of itself kind of put him on the map. And he has a knack for stepping up, really well-rounded goalkeeper. But I think, I wouldn't overlook Quentin Westberg. Guys I talked to here in Toronto talked about what a surprise he's been, and a pleasant one, since being brought in basically just to sort of push Alex Bono. I think it was at the start of this year. And he's really proved to be quality goalkeeper. He's overcame some blips early on in his TFC career. He's got that that mindset, and that language skill set that I'm sure helps. I mean, he's at least bilingual. He can speak French to guys like Mavinga. He's got the American background to understand the league a bit and kind of what goes into it. I've been impressed with him, and I think we just don't have as much of a sample size on Westberg. But I would not be surprised if he makes some big saves on Sunday.
Of course, Sunday is the big final, the last game of the MLS Cup Playoffs in the 2019 overall season. Looking back at just the last couple of weeks in the playoff, Charles, how different was the experience for you covering this league for a long time, the different format, and do you think that this format created not only worthy finalists, but made sure that the best teams won out of these playoffs?
There's always going to be upsets to some extent. It's just once you sign on to the playoff format of any kind, being an addendum to the regular season, you're always going to get some unexpected things happen, and maybe that leads to questioning, the overall fairness of it, because the league and knockout are just fundamentally different formats, different mindsets, different players and coaches step up to those different environments in different ways. But given that I think we've all grown familiar with the idea that this is a North American sporting concept that MLS just can't and won't do without. Once you move on from there, I think it's a good tweak. I'm not a big fan of having everything end so early and having such a long off season, because I think in the big picture of the development of players and national teams as well, for that matter, I think a really long off season is a problem that's going to have to be kind of addressed or ameliorated. But the single elimination format just makes too much sense. And I always remind people that you have to go back and ask why things were the way they were in the first place. And a really big factor in the old formats in the olden days was that in the early years of MLS, there was so much dependence on game day revenue, and every playoff game is bonus money for any team that qualifies. And so the owners, at least this is my understanding of the early decade, the owners were insistent that anybody who made the playoffs would at least get one home game in order to get that revenue. So there were sort of non-competitive considerations at work even back then. So I think now that they've gotten everybody on the same page to reward regular season quality with home field advantage in the postseason, I think it's worked out. It's not a free ticket. We saw that the top seeds haven't made it all the way through, but I think this is a positive tweak in a long-running series of tweaks to the MLS postseason format.
Well, they're going to add teams soon. We know this as well because that's what they do. However,
we'll see.
There's going to be 8 per side. But all right, so Charles, if at about 3 o'clock Pacific time, 3:30 Pacific time on Sunday, the confetti raining down is rave green, what did the Sounders do to make that moment happen?
I think it's going to come down to a huge home field advantage for them. I mean, the noise, the turf, all those things traditionally make Seattle one of the toughest places in the league to come, and that's going to be all amped up to 11 on Sunday. And I expect it'll be because they were able to impose themselves on the game's tempo and create danger with Rui Diaz and Ladero in the final third. I think those are the ones to watch. Those are the ones who tore apart LAFC, and they'll be key to the Sounders win.
Well, I'm not going to ask you, Charles, about Jozy Altidore. I am, but I'm not going to ask you whether he's going to play or not, because at this point in time, no one knows. But what I am going to ask you is this. Should TFC play Jozy Altidore after he's been out for as long as he has been, after he has missed the playoffs to this point, that they've been playing well without him? So if he is available at 50%, 70%, or whatever, should they play him?
Yeah, it's a great question. At this point, it's been a month since the original injury, and that really it's really hard to see what's happening there. I think the way they're approaching it, if nothing else, is giving Seattle more to prepare for. And given that I guess you could argue that maybe he would want to get healthy for men's national team games coming up or something. But really, there's no tomorrow. This is, and we were just talking about the long off season. So I think, and Vanny alluded to this the other day, it's going to take a lot to keep Josie out of uniform to even have the opportunity to come in and make an impact, even if it's 5-10 minutes, something like that. So I expect he'll be in uniform. And if he's not, then that'll tell you just what a persistent and difficult injury this has been.
Charles, I don't want to necessarily ask you predictions of the score because that could very well change easily in this game. You never know what can happen in a one moment during a final game. But I am going to ask you, how do you envision this game to unfold? Not necessarily tactically, whichever side you want to take, but how do you see this matchup come down to at 3:30 p.m. on Sunday? Well, actually, probably later than that, but
I expect there'll be some ebbs and flows. Both sides will have the nerves and the butterflies from 70,000 people being in the house, and I expect. And both of these teams are really proud, experienced groups that are able to recognize and read and react to the flow of play. So I expect there'll be a back and forth quality to this game, where one team will be in the ascendancy maybe for 10, 15 minutes, tries to make the most and cash in on those periods of superiority, and then the other one will find a solution, especially when you look at how fluid the two teams have been in terms of their ability to make tactical adjustments, change positions, move players around to try and create advantages. So I think there'll be a little bit of a chess match, but it's all going to be happening in a more pressurized environment than any of us typically see, even in a playoff game. So I think there'll be a nice bit of sort of drama and pageantry to it.
Before we say goodbye, Charles, for today, and we wish you a great weekend in Seattle and hopefully a great media mixer tonight as well. But before that, when I look at the matchup, of course, a third time in 4 years, and in big games and final games, sometimes it could be cagey, dodgy matchup because the moment I would say the all to play for, the trophy, the fans get the emotions, get to the players. This time around, we have two teams that are very experienced at big games, big moment. How entertaining of a game do you think it'll be? Because for me, I think because of the experience of both teams, we might see an actual regular game of soccer for once and not just a scared affair on the pitch.
Yeah, well, it's let's be honest, guys. It's not December in Toronto, so survival won't be an issue with the cold, and I think everybody will be ready to run about a bit and get after it. So I'm always loath to jinx it with pregame remarks, but I do expect there to be some goals here, and I think it'll be a fun show with a noon kickoff time. I think that's another little quirk for everyone to sort of adapt to, and I don't know if that's going to affect the players' mindsets at all. But again, when and this is my first game at CenturyLink Field, I have to say, but everything I know about that stadium is that you're going to have these walls of sound sort of cascading down. It's loud by design, and I think that's inevitably going to have a big effect on the mindset, the commitment of the players, and hopefully they get after it and carve open the defenses a bit more maybe than in their past meetings in the Cup Finals.
Charles Boehm, US Soccer Players, MLSsoccer.com, amongst other places. Thank you so much for your time today. We wish you a great time in Seattle and tonight, especially for the Media Mixer.
Come on, guys.
I wish I was there. Thank you, Charles, and we'll be right back after this short break. Always a pleasure, Charles.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. We'll get to the news of the day in a minute. For sure, we'll have more coverage on the Ottawa Fury situation on the Two Solitude Soccer podcast in the upcoming hours, but we will talk a little bit about it as well in the upcoming segment. But Duane, we're only 2 days away from MLS Cup final.
Indeed, it seems like a blink of the eye that we were watching games back in March, and it's been a strange season in a lot of ways here in Toronto. Obviously, it's ending very well, but there were stretches where it didn't look like it was going to happen, and then there was stretches where they did look like they could get some stuff done. So it's been an up and down year. It's been an interesting year. I asked the question on Twitter the other day whether or not the fact that they made MLS Cup final makes this a successful season for TFC, and it seems like an odd question, and I think the answer to that is yes. It's hard to not call it a success when you play for a championship, but at the same time, it's not as simple as I think people might immediately think of, because recency bias, right? The overall season was inconsistent, and I think if you're Toronto FC, you'll want to see that turn around a little bit so that maybe they aren't playing MLS Cup final on the road. Maybe they don't have to win 4 straight or 3 straight road games to get to win a championship. So as I said, I do think it is a success. They certainly are the hottest team in the league right now. That's still playing, certainly. I mean, Seattle's doing pretty well as well. But in terms of their last 13 games, it's been a remarkable run, a club record. They didn't even do it in 2017. But one more to go, and I honestly don't have a great feel for it. I was on my hometown radio station, friend of the show, David Foote, had me on CJBQ Belleville this morning. He asked me for not an outright prediction, but like whether I thought TFC had a chance, and I honestly couldn't answer it. It really is going to depend, I think, on the emotions of the first 20 minutes or so. We saw it in Atlanta, with Atlanta getting all the front foot early, and TFC damn lucky to not be down 2 goals. Can't repeat that. If they get through the first 10, 15 and settle in, I think, yeah, they absolutely are in with an opportunity to win this game, to nick a goal late or whatever. But it's one game soccer, man. I did the stats at the start of the playoffs that TFC had a 0.2% chance of winning based on their history. They'd only ever won 3 road games before, 3 road games in a row before. The 2 other times that worked out to less than 1% of all the opportunities they had to do so. But here's the thing. They don't have to win 3 road games in a row anymore. They just have to win 1.
Yeah, and every time the probabilities multiply. But it'll be an interesting matchup on Sunday, of course. We'll have special coverage. Soccer Today tomorrow. Soccer Today Sunday. MLS Cup all weekend here on the Sports Podcast Network. Our favorite week of the year, pretty much, is coming up. MLSPA, Bob Foos, the executive director, had a phone call press conference yesterday with Alejandro Bedoya, Jeff Lenterich, and Diego Rubio present as well. A few interesting tidbits coming out of this phone call. Duane, of course, they're getting ready for work stoppage. Not saying it is a possibility for sure, but there's always a possibility. Is it probable? We don't know, but if it is probable, they'll be ready. There's a few things, of course. Chartered flight will be a big discussion point and a demand of the players, because we know the CBA finishes on January 31st. Also, not just charter flights, but the targeted allocation money is something the MLSPA does not like at all, and they would like a better way, a better mechanism for players and the club to have more options, and the club to be controlling of their own allocation money process. So those two and a real free agency are what the players want in the negotiations. But apparently they've been talking with MLS for the last year, and both sides are encouraged by the way negotiations are going.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the interview left no bone, nothing to doubt that MLSPU is prepared to fight this a little bit more than they have in the past. And I think there's a couple things happening there. First off, their players are, better off now than they were in the past. I mean, you have still not, NBA or Major League Baseball or NHL or NFL levels, but there certainly are an average salary, a median salary is, closer to 200,000 now. So you're better prepared to be able to withstand a work stoppage if it comes to that. So that gives them, it embodies, it emboldens them a little bit, right? So that's, I think, an interesting sort of thing to consider. The TAM, the player, I think the playing stuff is going to happen. I think MLS will has taken so many hits PR-wise on the charters that they'll have come up with some kind of compromise that works. I don't know if it'll be full charters, but I think they'll be vastly increased. But it's going to be a battle if they try and go after the very structures of how this league is run in terms of the TAM gamut and stuff like that, because the league likes that. The league likes that because it's a parity mechanism. They like it because it's a cost control mechanism. It's not a totally open market, which is why the players would rather just be, if you're going to have a salary cap, just have a flat salary cap is basically what they're likely arguing for. So it could be messy. Do I think there's going to be a lockout or a strike? I don't think so yet. I would be surprised if it comes to it, because ultimately it's in the best interest of all parties to play. And this is not a situation where MLS can afford to be out of sight, out of mind for a while, like some of those other leagues that, well, even look at the history of work stoppages in major sports. It takes years for some of those leagues to recover from it, right? So I don't think MLS is quite there yet. So it's in their best interest. But I am hopeful that they'll get a solution done that, will not meet all of the players' demands by any means, but hopefully that it continues to move the league forward and allows more flexibility in terms of the signing of players.
At the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised, Wayne, if the TAM is tweaked a bit, but not completely taken away. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more charters, maybe not fully like you mentioned, but maybe just double, or at least not a limit on it. So whoever has the money can choose to use it the way they want. Maybe we're at that point in the league now, and that would make sense. But maybe the hill that they want to die on, the one that they were willing to die on in 2015, was free agency. And this time around, maybe a true free agency that you don't need to have 200 criterias before you're allowed to be a free agent to get. I'm exaggerating, but it's to illustrate the point. You have to have been 7 years in the league, at least 28, blah, 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 blah. It's a lot of free agency you're supposed to have after your second contract, or whichever way they worded, after maybe your first longer than 5-year contract or something, you become free agent. It's supposed to be nonsense, like it is. It's supposed to be easy. You'd be like, okay, it's intuitive. Your contract's over. You're a free agent. You're allowed to negotiate with the entire world. And we all know, if we look at the litigation on this across the world and the jurisprudence in the world of sports, owners are not supposed to hold the rights of players for a long time anyways. So the antitrust laws out there that soccer players always threaten to go after. So, there is a point there. And the world of soccer is different than another North American sport. So maybe a free agency in soccer is different than free agency in the rest of the world. And maybe that's the hill the soccer players in MLS are willing to die on this time around, a true free agency.
Yeah, certainly it is a major talking point for them. Soccer is unique because it's not like the other sports where really when you're talking about free agency, you're talking about in-league free agency, right? The ability to negotiate with other teams within the same league. Soccer, of course, they do have a form of free agency already, in the sense that once they're out of contract, they can negotiate with the whole rest of the world. What they can't do is move around MLS. And for a lot of these guys, the majority of the MLS Players Association players, the ability to negotiate with other MLS teams after their contract is up would be far more beneficial for them, because the vast majority of players, we're not just talking about the bigger names, right? You're talking about guys that are on like entry levels or like just a bit above, and just for their ability to find a fit is going to benefit them, and it's something that they want. They might not, Richie Larea, there's a perfect example in his Orlando situation, where he found his way to Toronto, but by and large, if that was a little easier for a player like that was out of options in Orlando, wasn't wanted by the club to walk away and find, in this particular case, maybe not the best example because he was released, but they could have played hardball with that, right? And you want to eliminate that. You want to not have a player that's rights are just held and there's no ability for them to find that kind of entry-level job somewhere else.
But it's not also that, Duane. It's also the fact that an MLS player will have more value in MLS, and he might get a better offer from another MLS team than somewhere else in the world. Example, a Jeff Larentowicz right now. Let's use him an example. Last year, if he was becoming a free agent, his value to a team like LAFC or another team in the league is way higher than it is for the team in the butt F in the middle of nowhere that never heard of him before and just receive his resume and look at him on Transfer Market, right? So to be able to monetize that value as a player, to be able to make more money, to benefit your financial situation for yourself, for your family, you should be able to monetize that value in league, and you couldn't before. So maybe with a true free agency, you'll find a ways to find example. A Richie Laryea, if the situation was different, he's in Orlando because he was drafted there or whatever, but he's a kid from Toronto region. His value is bigger in Toronto, and if he wants to monetize that and be able to make more money, right, we should have the possibilities for employees to benefit their situation, and that's how I look at it. So a true free agency in league is needed, I believe.
Well, yeah, and the other factor that we've talked about before is that, for guys that are making $60,000-$70,000 a year, which is not bad money by any means, but it is not. It's middle class money, right? And they may have spouses or families that can assist them and can double their income in some cases, or if they have a child that has childcare for them, and situations like that. So just the ability to work where it benefits you, not just monetarily, but life-wise, is another big deal for these guys, and it's something that I think we all can appreciate a little bit. Like, we've said it before, it'd be kind of a weird system for us to just randomly be told where we're living, right? These guys don't have the same power. They agree to it. They negotiate that, but at the same time, it's, some more flexibility would be required. I can't see them getting, absolute free agency within the league, but I do think you'll probably see maybe the elimination of the re-entry draft, maybe reduce it to 5 years experience or something like that. They'll probably get an incremental change in the eligibility, which is what they had the last time too, because the original free agent rules were absolutely outrageous. I think they had to be 31 or something before you get free agent the first time they gave it to, and now it's down to 27, and maybe they get down to 25 or something like that in this next one.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have a lot of time left on the show. Let's quickly finish on this situation, and we'll have more as soon as possible on our Patreon page, our Canadian Soccer Show, 2 Solid 2 Soccer Podcast, and more tomorrow. I promise we'll do a extra show, bonus show on this situation. The Ottawa Fury are no longer. Julian de Guzman, John Pugh, Mark Goody announced at 11 a.m. today, all three from OSAG, and Julian de Guzman was the general manager of the Ottawa Fury. Emotional press conference. The Ottawa Fury are no more.
Yeah, there was some suggestion or that they might be able to, Phoenix themselves in a year, but it almost seemed like a bit of lip service there. I mean, it was not an attractive press conference either. They essentially threw CONCACAF and the CSA under the bus, said that they were forced to fold.
Well, USSF even more than CSA. They said Canada Soccer gave their approval for the sanctioning, but that USSF and CONCACAF delayed everything.
Yeah, so look, it's a very complicated issue that as you say, we'll have to dive in a little deeper on another show. Don't have the time to really do it justice right now, and I am still working a few angles out there to find out as much as I can about what exactly went down, but I think what I'll say right now is it's unfortunate. You just don't want to see a team fold. You don't want to see this fans lose their team, and that's what we're sitting at today. And I feel for those fans a lot, and hopefully we can have some kind of resolution. So there's if not the Fury, then at least some other team, wearing Ottawa colors in the very near future.
Yeah, the nation's capital has to be represented. On that note, make sure you follow our Patreon feed, where you can find the 2 Solid 2 Soccer Podcast, Canada's premium podcast talking about Canadian soccer and Canadian soccer only. Ottawa will be our featured subject in a bonus show coming out before tomorrow afternoon. I take a pledge to this. And until tomorrow, where you'll find a bonus edition of MLS Cup Today tomorrow, and probably a little pregame on Sunday. It is officially time for MLS Cup this weekend, and we are really excited here at the Sports Podcast Network. As always, you can follow Duane at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee, and this show at Soccer Today SPN, live Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific. And until next time, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.